poverty is not a lack of character, it's a lack of cash.
In Rajasthan, for example, where we did our baseline surveys, we understood 6,000 is the monthly average income, 2,000 rupees out of which goes as debt repayment every month, which is 33% of their income. The first investment that goes is in building a house. But people who already have land and housing, the first investment goes in building livelihood.
What has surprised you the most about this whole outcome? The research you have done, the pilots you have run, like these are the 2-3 key takeaways which we haven't thought about. This will make a difference. Transferring cash to the communities is a key policy tool used by various governments, and there are various variations to this tool. Some governments have conditional cash transfers, some have unconditional cash transfers. Within conditional, there are different variations. Some are trying to do targeted cash transfers. Some have a trigger, right? Like if you do school on enrollment, you'll get cash transfer. So there are different variations. And over the years, especially in last decade, this has become a key policy tool by governments across the globe. It started primarily in South America, Central America, but it has been adopted wholesale by state governments in India. Even national governments have national government of India has many program on this. So considering this context, today I'm talking to founders of Project Deep. Project Deep is the only organization in India currently working on unconditional lump sum cash transfers. They have a program running. It's a very recent organization founded in 2023 by two founders, Muzamil and Pankhuri. Great to have you here.
Great to be here, Nitin.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. So the first question I wanted to ask you guys is, what made you start an organization focused on cash transfer? Because for me, this topic is sort of like out of the key, sort of like mainstream domains like education, health, or and like many people do early childhood education. We have talked environment. These are like the mainstream topics around sectors with what we do. But considering your background and maybe because of the background, why did you thought about launching an organization on unconditional cash transfer?
Great. Firstly, thank you for having us here and helping us share our story and our work through this platform. Um, Cash transfers, I think, for me is very synonymous with choice. Um, how do you actually empower communities on the ground? Like, how do you bring people into the solution making process? Um, Early on, I had watched a TED talk which was poverty is not a lack of character, it's a lack of cash. And that's just so simple, right? Like, someone's poor, you give them money. It's in like all the sectors you mentioned. If someone's sick, you give them medicine. If someone doesn't have education, you give them, like, you teach them. But when there's poverty, there's so much complex programming, and which sometimes works because it is a complex problem. But at the base of it, just the choice, the empowerment, the agency, some of these factors that need to be looked upon. For me, that was the first very natural pull to say, how do you break the hierarchy between the giver and the receiver? How do you break some of that paternalistic lens that we have towards serving community? So I think those were the things that drew me. Now, of course, there's a lot more that I understand about this space and that keeps me here. But I think that was the initial pull that made me think that, if no one in India is really doing this, then it is a gap that should be plugged. And that's how Project Deep was started.
Right. And Muzamil, you?
Very similar to Pankhuri. More of a lived experience also. Both of us have been in the social sector now for more than 5 years. So before Project Deep also, we were working with different NGOs. I have been on ground, working in rural tribal hamlets, both in India and in some countries in Africa. Uh, I was working in the education space. So we were building education spaces for intergenerational spaces essentially. So kids could also come in, grandmothers could also come in and learn in the same space, things that they wanted to learn. So there were elements of choice, there was elements of freedom in learning. A key challenge while I was implementing these programs was that adults had different stressors at home before they could prioritize skilling or learning in their lives. Kids, I observed, were still working on agricultural fields, were not going to schools, were not coming to educational spaces during the agricultural seasons. So those were the first barriers that one had to overcome before they could prioritize any sort of development in their life. Those barriers could be overcome with money, essentially. And we were spending a lot of money in creating these physical spaces, trying to solve problems for a set of community, not giving them money directly. So we would spend money in creating the physical space. We would spend money in employee salaries and creating the head office, and all of this money, a philanthropic capital, which was supposed to be meant for the recipients, the people who are more vulnerable. All of that money would get spent in the process itself, which we see at a government level also sometimes, that the money gets spent in bureaucracy. In 2008, the statistic was very popular that it takes 3 rupees to deliver 1 rupee of ration in the country. So that amount of leakage in the system was something that was to be avoided. So that also came from our own personal experiences working in the sector. Cash transfers, we got to know about the idea through a TED talk. Through Rutger Bregman has been a global advocate of the idea. He has written about this in his books. Give Directly has worked over the past 14 years in African countries and US. It's a US based organization. They've collated more than 300 RCTs in this space. So there was a lot of global evidence, and nobody was doing this in India. The organization actually got started when both Pankhuri and I got promoted in our respective organizations. We wanted to donate our own bit. So we started looking for different set of organizations that were doing cash transfers, and nobody was there in India to donate to. So that's where we saw the gap. It started as a pet project between us. We wanted to do research to scale it someday. We started talking to a few people. They got excited. We got excited, and it snowballed into a full-fledged organization. So more of a accidental entrepreneurs, but happy to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah, means this was what I was thinking, right? Even if you have an idea, right? You could have gone through advocacy lens. You could have like, we can do research in India on this topic. There are so many existing uh, cash transfer programs already, but sort of like you decided to do a unconditional lump sum cash transfer in a village in out of mainstream. Like, why the decision to give unconditional? Why the decision to give a lump sum amount? And how did you choose the village? Like, I wanted to understand this journey from like two folks in Mumbai working. Like, many people get bonus, many people want to give donate, but that journey still is like a step taken. Like, it's like takes you out of your what journey you have been.
Yeah.
So what made you go to this village?
So I can start and Muzamil can add, of course. Like Muzamil said, the idea was if we had to give money, what would be our ideal channel? And when we didn't find it, we started exploring multiple routes. I mean, the first option wasn't that, oh, let's quit and let's kind of go to a village. Um, but we were looking at the evidence of Give Directly, right? And it made sense that if we want to do something, we should do it systematically. Um, we did start off with a small pilot in Mumbai itself. Uh, when we spoke to people about the idea, there was a lot of skepticism also.
Yeah.
They were like, and rightfully so. Like somebody very nicely told us that you can say unconditional, but you need to experience it. Like if somebody spends the money in a way that you don't think is right, how do you feel about it? So the first advice we got was that try it at a small scale before you leave everything and, start doing this as your, and that experience really validated and confirmed our, belief in this idea. So just one day, the two of us went to an ATM, withdrew some like 10,000 rupees, and we went to the slums in Mumbai itself in RA, and we said we'll give 1,000 rupees each to 10 people. Um, the first barrier was that nobody believed that we wanted to give them free money. So when people, like one woman was like, I won't give you my Aadhaar card details. The other was like, if you come back even in 2 weeks, I can't return even 1,000 rupees. That really stayed with me, right? Like we think Mumbai may 1,000 rupees, like, or surely they can return it in some way. Another woman said that my son will fight with me that I've taken money from somebody without knowing who it is. So the first barrier was convincing people that this kind of work can happen. This can exist as a program. But then we found some, support, and then we positioned as a research project. We said we won't take the money back. We come back in 2 weeks and ask you what you did with this. That's all we want. We don't want anything else.
Right.
And so we found like 10 people, about 7 women and 3 men, and we gave the money. And we went back in 2 weeks. And that is really what cemented our, real belief. Somebody was, one woman especially, she was so grateful. She said that had been looking for just 500 rupees from my neighbors to start my vegetable vending business, because this was like right after COVID, when people's savings were not there, and like just there was a lot of liquidity problem. People didn't have money. She was like, my neighbors couldn't even lend me 500 rupees, so I could start off my business. And that's the day you guys arrived, coincidentally. So with the 1,000 rupees, she was able to like start her rolling business of vegetable vending, just 1,000 rupees. Um, Somebody else started insurance for their daughter. So he was an educated person, but had to stop at insurance during COVID because they didn't have savings or any other money. He's like, it was my daughter's birthday, and this really pushed me to say, let's restart. And if not now, when? Somebody else had an injury that like the same week, so they were able to get treatment in time. But I think my favorite story was of this woman who was super excited. She said, I will do something great with the 1,000 rupees and tell you. And when we went back, she said that we asked her, what did you do? And her response was that I bought coffee and started dieting. And I was really confusing. Like, coffee is not for 1,000 rupees, right? Like, it's Nescafe packet. Like, 10 rupees, you get small pouch.
Right.
She's like, but after really long, when you said that this money is for you and you should think what you want to do, did I actually sit to prioritize myself and think about my aspirations? And like health concerns related to weight, etc., have always been there. But like being able to prioritize my health, diet, buy coffee, do that thing was like always deprioritized. Like I couldn't think about it that much. This really pushed me to think about myself. I bought small coffee, but I gave the rest of the money to my mother for vegetable vending. But this idea of aspirations, just latent aspirations came from there. And that's when we really started investing more into understanding what kind of models work. Uh, if we had to do this project at scale and do research, how would we do it? And we've been largely inspired by Give Directly's model, which is the lump sum model. So that's the question on why lump sum. Like monthly transfers have been happening even in our country. Like if you look at pensions, if you look at some of the older programs, they provide monthly benefits like economic security, um, just that certainty that a certain amount will come into your account the next month. Lump sum, nobody in India had done before. um, I mean, later realized that there was one small pilot that had happened pre-COVID, but nobody was doing it as a sustained programming with research. And unconditional was the bedrock of what we wanted to do. Like, just that we don't want to put ourselves in a position of saying that we know more than you. This is your life. You are obviously well placed to know what works for you. And so we don't want to put any conditions. So that's how the program design happened. The location, of course, just two young founders, no organization registered. Who's going to take you seriously? Almost it was of elimination. Like we had some friends who were in Vardha. We were sure we wanted to do it like in low income communities. Starting in urban areas is a little bit hard. They're very densely populated. You don't have that kind of money raised in the first go. So to be very honest, it was almost a process of elimination to say, let's at least get this off the road. Let's get started. And that's how we ended up in Vardha. We did extensive recce's. We visited a lot of villages, spoke to people. At the end of it, the first one was by gut. We were like, okay, this community seems very ambitious. They seem very proactive and aspirational to do something. Let's work with them, like without knowing us, they kind of engaged with us really well for half an hour, 45 minutes. This is not to say the other communities were not. Like I said, it was more of a gut feeling for the first one. It's later that we built out our frameworks of saying how do we select communities. The first one was simple. Let's find a small community of 50 households, low income communities that is stressed out by the lack of cash. Just a very simple guideline that we went with and visited like lots of villages there. Um, and that's how Krishnapur happened. I still remember just leaving the house of the person where we were doing the FGD, and both of us were very clear that, okay, this we found our place. So, first one was more heart led than logic led. But then we were able to then work backwards and put stuff into frameworks in terms of how to select location. aspirations.
And like, so Krishnapur is decided, and but still there are two people who are coming from outside and giving cash, right? The same problem you faced at Mumbai,
Yeah.
right? Like, how do you convince people to trust you enough? And like,
Uh,
it's not a common experience. Like,
yeah.
if you're not from a government, like, or anybody know you,
Mm.
like, what was that experience of convincing people that this is a, and what do you say? Like, what do you tell them that this kind of cash transfer is like, what it's for? Like, why do you they should take your money? Like, maybe you come later and take it back. Like, they will have so much skepticism, right? So how did you, okay, you have decided the place, what's next? Like, how do you mobilize them in a way?
So, because like I mentioned, we both have been working in the social sector, so there was some experience of working with communities that I had before uh, with my prior organization. That came in pretty handy to start with, because that gave a lot of confidence also that this can be done. You go on ground, people do engage with you. It doesn't seem that difficult. What was challenging was to understand some of these bits, that how do you land the message in the right way so that it's not construed as something else. The the pilot that Pankhuri spoke about, which happened before we did it, there's a very nice 5-minute video that they made of it, which is
So the
available.
community made the
The people who conducted the pilot
Okay.
before us had made. And in that video, they showed that there was a rumor that if you take the money, these guys will come and after a few years will take your kidney away. So that rumor had spread that
Right.
don't take free money, essentially.
Yeah.
So we knew that some of these things could happen, or there are chances of monetary fraud, and how to prevent those. So some of these things we were thinking about program planning. The first thing we did was to get Miriam Lekar-Oketa, who was the research director at Give Directly, on our advisory board to start planning the program.
Even before you look sort of like
Even
started.
before we went on ground.
Right.
So program planning had started, and we have been. So our timeline was that in 6 months we hit the ground. That's the first thing we wanted to do, because the prototype experience was also the 10,000 rupees in Mumbai slums was pretty powerful. And we wanted to do more of that. We wanted to get our hands dirty very quickly, learn from the ground instead of reading more and more research papers, which we were already doing.
Right.
So 6 months was the timeline. I think it took us 9 months to hit the ground. But 9 months we reached the community. We started reaching out to different organizations who are working in the grassroots already. So organizations that has been working with these communities over 10 years, 12 years. The idea was to leverage their trust, leverage their understanding of the community, the knowledge that they have, and work through grassroots NGOs, which is our model right now as well, which we continue to do. The first one in Krishnapur, we, like Pankhuri said, we found some friends who have been working in that community, and through them we went on ground.
And so if you have like decided the place, trust established because they already know someone you know, so there is a stakeholder already there. And like then you decide how to give and who to give, right? That's also a question which comes in if you're giving cash transfer. Since you have already read the research, like how do you decide? Because I'm thinking within a family also, like family is the unit of cash transfer. Within a family, there are dynamics, right? There are hierarchy. Like, how do you decide who to give, and like, will it be a cash directly, or will it be a bank account, or how are you thinking? And then how does the dynamics change? Like, what is the process when you first give it, and is there a time consideration also?
Yeah. I think that has been one of our big learnings in terms of who to give the money. So, at a village level, we don't choose families, right? Like, once we've chosen the village, it's a universal program.
Okay.
Going by the same idea of just not putting ourselves in the driver's seat to say, where do we draw? All lines at some point seem artificial, right? You say that, will you divide based on income? Will you do it based on caste, based on livelihood? But those things are dynamic. Like within a community, you have to lift everyone together. Only then can you solve it. It's a very systemic issue. So we were clear that it'll be universal. Within the family, initially we had started with oldest working woman, but it was a big learning. Like, how do you define working? Like, is it if she earns income, or like, because women are working. Like, if you're
right,
working
yeah.
on your field, you're taking your livestock to the fields, or like you're taking care of livestock. Oldest has its own issues because sometimes they're really old. Are you going to make an old person go to the bank 5 times just because you've chosen them to receive the money? So that criteria we've let go of now. We've said any adult woman that the family decides.
Mm.
We've stuck to the criteria of women because we do see that it helps with just them having a say in financial decisions, right? I'm not saying it transforms their lives. A one-time transfer is not necessarily, the outcome is not, that it will change household dynamics completely. But I do think it's a few steps forward because the money is in the woman's account. She has to kind of be part of the conversation on what to do. Having said that, the household is the unit. So typically you see decisions are made, for whatever is good for the household. Um, Timing is also an interesting question. Like I said, before we chose Krishnapur, we had done a lot of conversations. We almost call it our bike yatra. Like the two of us been on a two-wheeler and just traveling multiple villages, just
In
talking to
that area.
people. That area, otherwise, like closer here, like to Pune, nearby to Pune villages. We had also been to Odisha was after that. But we'd been to multiple villages in Maharashtra, Rajasthan, different places. And what we realized is that there is a cycle. I mean, the lack of money is a constant, but in some periods it becomes more acute. So, especially in communities that are dependent on agriculture for their livelihood, just before the sowing season, they need a lot of money. You need to buy seeds, fertilizer, labor, you need to like clean up your land, weed out. That's when the debt cycle starts. Like, you don't have money, you take debt. Then you do agriculture. As soon as you harvested, you're repaying the debt. So you're stuck in that cycle. There is no like savings or disposable income. And God forbid it's a bad harvest, you are still liable to repay the debt, but you actually don't have the money. So what we said is that a large part of the population we want to serve in some way or the other is connected to agriculture. Either you're doing agriculture or your migration cycles are also linked to agriculture. Like you are coming back home to sow, etc.
And then going back.
And then you're going back. So we said this is a good timing for us to look at, like Kharif and Rabi. We still didn't say you have to use it for this, but we recognize that this is when debt is going high. This is when money is needed. And so May is like the most hot month of the year, is when we are like, actually implementing our programs. The first cycle and the second is in October, November. And I think that helps. I think that for different communities, we are yet to identify different cycles, like, depending on what their life stage is. But for agrarian and migrant communities, I think being able to understand this has really helped with the program. So that in Krishnapur, for example, we saw that one of the biggest sort of surprising factors for us, we had anticipated that people will, invest in agriculture or buy livestock. But one of the big things we heard from them is that interrupting the debt cycle improved the quality of their crops. And they explained this to us to say that when they're dependent on credit, the timing doesn't match. Like, I'm going to 4 people to ask for money, somebody will give the money. And agriculture is a very disciplined process. If it has rained today, there is a process you have to do it. If it's pushed, then it impacts the quality. That year, because they had ready money, they were able to time it based on their inherent knowledge and do it. And you could see the pride, like, oh, look at my cotton crop. It's so big. It's never been this big and green earlier. When we went back for our surveys, they were almost, the way you show off your children, oh, my child knows ABC and 1 to 10. That's how they were talking about their plants. And it was really heartening to see. So that the timing plays a really crucial role is, I think, what we've realized.
I mean, raising money interferes with your planning, right? And
Yes.
this is interesting. And another thing which I was reading was in that report, right? The Krishnapur report, the impact assessment report. You talk about like there was a use case of repairing houses.
Yeah.
Like that also emerged as a key outcome. Like they spent money on the houses, which doesn't come naturally. Like they could have found any like using for a productive asset, right? That's one of the point I'm trying to make is there's a argument can be made that cash transfer should be used for productive assets, but a house necessarily might not be a productive asset. Yeah.
Right. There are a lot of people who ask us that what is unproductive, what is productive
Exactly.
use of money, right?
Yeah.
The two things that we did. One was to understand this at an individual level. So 3 buckets. One is all the good things that you can imagine that a person should spend money in. most people think about education, people think about investments in livestock or agriculture or any productive that will give you an income as good use of money. So nobody has a problem with this. This is good to go. The second one, people are a little bit on the fence about, like, housing. You raised that housing is necessary, it's an essential, but it's not necessarily productive because it may not give you an income. Marriage, some people are on a fence with. Motorbikes or cell phones are some people are on a fence with. And then there is a third category, which is a complete no, which is alcohol, gambling. This money should not go into. We understood over a period of time by looking at multiple our own experiences through the community programs and looking at global research that first everybody is okay with. Second, what happens, and we in the first year we worked with agrarian community, primary source of income through agriculture. Second project we did in Rajasthan with migrant community, primary source of income through migration. In the first year. Second year, what we did was we worked across asset vulnerable groups, which means people who own land and housing, people who don't have land and housing. And we assessed.
This was in the second one, which was in near Udaipur.
Both in Rajasthan and Maharashtra, we continued. So 2 projects in Maharashtra, 2 in Rajasthan. First cycle we would do, May cycle we would do in Maharashtra. The second cycle, October, November, we would do in Rajasthan.
Right.
In the first 2 years. And to understand spending patterns specifically. And what we understood was, first bucket that I explained, people are okay with. Second bucket, people nonetheless have these expenses to be made. People need to buy a house or build a house for themselves. Motorbike is something that they will buy. Wedding is across income stratas. People spend money. Wedding, funeral expenses are sometimes bigger. People are going to spend money, whether you give it to them, whether they take it through credit, whether they earn it themselves. The point is about their cash flows, that if they spend this money, if they don't have this money comes from debt. To build a house, it comes from debt. Debt in these cases is 25% interest rate. It's in urban spaces for us, it's
25% monthly.
25% in a year.
Sometimes more.
Sometimes more.
Yeah. That's a minimum. I think 25%
that's
is a minimum per annum.
It's 2% per month. Is the calculation starts. Which is really high amounts of debt. So in migrant communities, what we observed, especially that because their primary source of income is through migration, which is daily wages, whatever they earn, it gets spent in routine expenses. So any bigger expense that they want to make, whether it's purchasing a motorbike, whether it's bigger health costs also, all of that mostly comes through debt because they don't have that savings built in for them because the money keeps getting spent, that whatever comes from daily wage. So their housing is on debt, their marriage cost is on debt. So in Rajasthan, for example, where we did our baseline surveys, we understood 6,000 is the monthly average income. 2,000 rupees out of which goes as debt repayment every month, which is 33% of their income. Highest was food expense, second highest was debt repayment. Second highest expense wasn't livelihood, wasn't education, wasn't all the good things that you wanted. It was debt repayment for all the bigger things.
Right.
Once you solve for that, then the money that they were supposed to put into this or they were repaying as debt, their disposable income opens up. And that income again goes in all the good things that you wanted, always. Just to address the third bucket, in more than 300 our cities, we have never seen people using money for alcohol or gambling simply because, one, there is a lot of motivation. Once you have financial purchasing power, you try to do better things. So that motivates you a lot more. That gives you a lot more aspirations to build this out. We also saw this behavior change in Krishnapur itself. There were landless farmers who would work on other people's land. With this money, for the first time, they took their own land on rent.
Right.
This had not happened with microfinance capital before, where there was risk associated of returning the capital back. So we saw that boost in aspirations. So that boost in aspirations doesn't necessarily go into alcohol gambling. It goes into more productive usage. And there's a financial security net, which allows them to do more with their lives.
Yeah, this is interesting. Like microfinance is a debt capital. So you cannot take risk. You won't take risk. But this is sort of like an equity capital, seed capital to you. So it opens up ideas, more aspirations also, and you take more risky. Though these are not risky things, but still more aspirational, right? And it really opens up. You have seen that, like something they wouldn't do otherwise. And you receive this feedback in your conversations, like when you have done like I wanted to explore this more. Like, how does it open up ideas and how open up aspirations of people? Like having a seed capital or risk capital.
So I can just add to what Muzamil was saying on with a story, and I can share two examples here. One is from Krishnapur itself. Like I remember we had done the baseline survey of this person called Ashok. Um, he would not look at us. He would look on the floor, respond only how much you asked, and wanted to like not really confident or quite like contained in himself. Um, and then the program happened and we went back. And cut to when we came back, the man was sitting with his like hands behind his head and chatting with us happily about things. And he was the first one actually who said that if the money lies in my account, it will get spent on routine consumption. So let me park it away. And he was one of the first people who took land on rent for the first time. He took the help of his neighbors to be able to identify where, what to do. Uh, to also say that information flows much more seamlessly. We think that we want to go and give some advice or we want to teach them something. Their knowledge is there inherently, some of these things. Um, he was so much more confident. And cut to 1 year later, when he had taken the land on rent, he told us that you've given me money. I am going to double it this year and, do much more with it. We went back a year later. Not only had he doubled the money, like he had a great cotton harvest. Like he worked hard, he managed that. He started his own construction business. He employs 3 more people now. And with that money, he's able to continue taking the land on rent. And then he takes contracts for making people's roofs. Two things that I want to share by this is one that you asked, like, have we seen these stories? We have seen this story of transformation in 1 year, not only about taking land on rent, but the fact that he was a contractor. He has the skill of building houses, etc. But he had never considered that he would be able to do that again in life by himself, like as a self employed person, not employed by somebody else. But this kind of opened up, his opportunities, opened up the way that he could look at his life. He showed us his like contracting material and he was so excited to really, share his joy also with us. Similarly, we've seen in Rajasthan as well about collective aspiration. So sometimes what happens, like, okay, you don't have a house, I don't have a house. Our first target is let's construct our house well. Then if you buy a buffalo, then your neighbors are seeing that okay, this is the next step on the ladder. But often with certain communities, those opportunities don't come by because there is no money. You're still like figuring out how to crack the first level. What we saw with the program in Rajasthan is that the collective aspiration went up because you do have people who spent on their house, some people spend on land leveling. We saw diverse usage, and some people bought buffalo, some people made borewell. But what happened with that is that everyone's neighbors had different things. So suddenly, this guy who's put a borewell, his next stage is already set that okay, once I earn money from selling vegetables, the next step I want is a buffalo. And this is not something we are hypothesizing. This is what we've heard from them. कि ये मेरा हो गया है, अभी अगले साल में ये they were able to chart out that. And then when you look at it from a zoomed out lens, you see that the inspiration is coming from people around you itself. So it's not to say that, I think there's no external role. I feel like all this is there. It's already there. This is like oil to the engine. वो बंद पड़ा है. You just give it that little bit and it will start moving ahead. So these, we've seen this, and these two are like very concrete examples coming to my mind, but we've seen that in the other communities as well, where, people just start to think very differently once they have, like you called it, seed capital. They don't have any worries of repaying this or returning this to somebody.
Yeah, so this is giving me this idea. Like, so once you're giving cash to a community, so that person now is have this capital to do something. So he's learning from that. Plus, the community is also like learning because there are many iterations happening, right?
Yeah.
There are like 10 experiments happening in the community.
Yes.
So the community knows these 2 experiments work. So the next time they know.
Yes.
So like, but if there's no capital, there's no room for experimentation.
Yeah.
Now we have 10. So in a way, is it right to say that it's also building capacity of the community and all the individual families also to do things? Like, is capacity building the right framing for this kind of cash transfer? Is it an outcome you see or think that rather than comparing a program of capacity building, we should also see a program like give them money, they will build their own capacity to do things.
So this can be looked at multiple levels. I think what we missed saying is what the program is. So I'll just clarify that we do select a hamlet for the audiences, especially. Uh, what we do is we select a hamlet. A hamlet is a smaller subsegment of a village. A village may have 1,500 households. A hamlet has 50, 100 households. We select a hamlet, and each household gets 65,000 rupees unconditional cash transfer in the bank account of a woman. Uh, that's the program. We time it basis sowing season, basis migration cycles, depending on the community we are working with. And that's the experiments and pilots we're talking about. Um, to answer your question, Nitin, about capacity, this can be looked at multiple levels. So one is what Pankhuri was mentioning, that there's a framework that we have built, which is very similar to what Maslow's hierarchy goes as.
Right.
Uh, and this got more and more structured for us in our different experiments. So when we worked with uh, people who had land and housing and people who did not have land and housing, we could see the first investment that goes is in building a house. But people who already have land and housing, the first investment goes in building livelihood. So you could see the trajectory of people growing uh, one after the other. Like once you have your land, once you have housing as your foundational assets, your next investments would be in more livestock, would be to set up a kirana store, would be to get a motorbike to start migrating better, or selling stuff through the motorbike. So you see that trajectory in the different experiments that we tried doing. That shows that how capacity, both at an individual level and at a community level, gets built. In the first year in Krishnapur, few households that took the risk of taking land on rent, it did not necessarily work out. That the harvest money wasn't enough, the climate maybe did not suit, the land soil wasn't the best. We went next year to do an annual assessment. A year later, we went back and again asked, "What are you doing this year?" This time, we did not give any money. We were just curious to see what's happening in the community. And the same set of people did take that risk again, saying that for some people it worked out and for some it did not. So you see the risk taking capacity has gone up, at least the aspirations have gone up. So there is capacity building at an individual level and at a community
Right.
level,
Yeah.
both happening together. Just the access. So 35 lakhs, 32.5 lakhs in 50 households, 65,000 each. That liquidity in that community allows them to do a lot more with that money, because that circulates. So in
Yeah, it
the
circulates
results
also.
of our first pilot was after a year when we went, we saw that within 50 household hamlet, 47 additional acres of land got tilled, which allowed job creation for 36 people in the community who would otherwise migrate for jobs, but this time they were hired in their neighbors' farmlands for as agri labor. So jobs got created in that small community. We saw after a year when harvest came in, 22% increase in income. So next year we did not had to give them money. Everybody had money from the harvest, which they did not have to repay as debt, which was their own money. So instead of money rotating at our level, the money was starting to rotate at their level. So more cash in hands to invest further into different set of assets and build their lives forward. So that is what we saw in terms of capacity building.
Right. Yeah, even if a person is not doing something, but he's learning from, or family is not doing something, they're learning from other families. 5, 6 has worked, and this has worked for them.
Yeah.
But this point, like, how many times, right? So one of the objection I've read, like, it brings addiction to this cash transfer, free money. Like, how do you propose should be, like, is it once or is it second, or like what will be an ideal program in a community for this kind of a specific program? It should be twice or thrice, or like you feel like it's okay one, even if once seed capital will make a difference in the community based on the 2 pilots you have done so far. Like, what do you feel? Do you want to go back there?
So we've had some learnings. I think going back to the pyramid that Muzamil mentioned, we're still mapping out the stages of vulnerability, right? So in our most recent program, what we saw is that people didn't have to strengthen houses, they had to make houses from scratch. Like you're living in a kacha house, you're kind of putting it down and starting to build a house. 65,000 is not enough for that. That was a learning. But we are seeing that people are pulling in from different sources, being able to manage. We'll have to look at it in a long term, right? Like we'll have to look at it what's happening in 1 year, what's happening in 2 years. Then there is the second level which we saw where it was a mix. Like people are strengthening their houses, but they're also able to do some sort of livelihood investment. There was a community which we had intentionally chosen, which had like proper pakka housing. They were able to improve their livelihood, not like pick up a new, like start something new, but they had something good. They were able to make it better. The reason I'm reiterating all of it is that it will differ on that. Like,
And the
if you,
community dynamics.
yeah, like if you manage to build your foundational assets, maybe you do need another infusion to improve livelihood. Maybe those who are improving livelihood can have a different combination of capital that goes to them. So those are frameworks that we're building. It's all about how do you provide the adequate capital based on the need of the community. Um, I think the idea of getting addicted to cash or free money, research doesn't really show that. There have been, because it is one of the biggest resistance to cash transfers, there has been enough studies on that, right? Like, does it discourage labor force participation? Do people get lazy and get more addicted to just the cash transfers? I mean, Iran, in fact, like, why do we look far? Iran has a long running cash transfer program, and we see that there has been no negative impact on labor force participation. In fact, what it enables people to do is pursue higher education, pick up self employment. And so, if you look at number of hours employed may go down, but that is only because it's been diverted to like education or being able to set up your own enterprises. And honestly, Muzamil started with that, right? Like there have been so many studies. Um, the addiction part doesn't happen because you are we are working with communities that need so much money. We are not actually giving
Enough.
enough that is going to like suddenly meet all their needs and they will be like, good to go. That's not a scientific, that's more of a philosophical response. But more scientifically as well, I feel like there are two roles that cash transfers play. One that we've been talking about, like lump sum to build foundational assets and to basically improve your life in a significant way. But the other role that cash transfers also plays that of a security net, right? When we're talking about stuff like climate crisis, just a lot of unemployment, people, even those who are employed, are earning really low. Like if you look at the daily wages, etc. Um, Cash transfers play that net. Like um, how do you avoid some of the preventable distress in communities? um, we do provide welfare in many ways, right? We are trying to forget welfare. Even in philanthropy, there's so much charity of clothes and so many things that we want to give, which is also good. I'm not here to like diss any program, but the idea is if you give the money, people have the choice. If you give the money, there will be more simulation in the market. So it's not new. I think we are in a state where a certain section of the society does need more support. Will need more things for them to like come up to a stage where they're self-reliant, self-sufficient. Cash transfers only accelerates that process. So I think that is the idea behind promoting this tool.
Okay. So one question I had, Pankhuri, was you recently came up with a report, right, on unconditional cash transfer, and I believe there is no state of sector report. So what was the reasoning behind that report, and like what did you figure out? What did you learn making that report?
Yeah. It's been very exciting to make the report, but I'll start with the why. After having done, after having worked with over 500 families, 5 communities, we had enough evidence which echoed the global evidence that giving cash works. Um, but then there were two still missing gaps, right? This conversation still polarizes people. Um, you say cash transfers to somebody, your one reaction will be, oh my God, they're going to drink and gamble. One person will be like, oh, but what is cash transfers? How are you giving it directly? And then there are those who've obviously been in the space or studied it through different ways that understand what you're talking about or are curious about it. But that spectrum still exists, right? Um, so to be able to cut through some of this fog, to cut through, some of these myths that still exist. Um, there is a lot of global work that has happened, but in India, a very India context specific conversation is still missing. It's like it happens in small pockets. It's not a widespread conversation that has still happened. Um, and the conversation had to start with a foundational document. And we thought a landscape report is a good way to do this.
Right.
It does a few things. It introduces the idea that this is not new. We are talking about it today. Like today in Maharashtra, because there's Ladki Bahin, a lot of people in Maharashtra know about this. But cash transfers have been happening since 1980s.
Mm.
You had pensions. Then you come to like the DBT mission was introduced with this idea that benefits should go directly to citizens and that there should be more transparency, it should be more streamlined. You have cash transfers for farmers, you have cash transfers for different groups in the country. Now, with women being the largest group of people receiving these transfers. And while we continue to say this, it helps to have it in a place where people can go back and refer to it. What is the history? What are the budgets being allocated? Who are they being targeted towards? We found that in 1 decade, the budgets allocated to cash transfers have gone up 23 times. 23x is huge. We've seen that the shift has happened from the center being the largest sort of spender on cash transfers to individual states picking it up. Like now the ratio is 75-25, 75 being states. The two largest groups that are getting cash transfers are women and farmers. They make up 75%. And the most preferred model is monthly transfers. You get a certain amount every month. It's just certainty in your account that whether I have a job or not, if my daily wage or not, you're getting a certain amount. So it really helped us explore some of this, consolidate our understanding of what's going on. It also helped us speak to a lot of experts. Like we spoke to economists, policymakers, practitioners, advocates of this space, both in India and outside India, to get their perspectives as well. That are we as a country, are we being financially prudent? Is this the right design? Is this the right amount? How can implementation be improved? And finally, the big question on impact. Like we are giving so much money. Do we really know what it's translating to as impact? We are, of course, very big believers of cash transfer and we know that it makes a difference. But there needs to be more numbers in India backing this. That if a state is spending so many thousand crores, reaching 2 crore women, how has the life of these women changed? So this report then also becomes a base for us to chart out the way forward for the whole sector, not just ourselves, to say like these are the 5 things that need to be done. Can we all come together? So apart from strengthening the narrative, apart from creating common terminology, like what does unconditional really mean? How is unconditional different? How is conditional different from targeting? Um, Apart from setting that common terminology, it has also helped us to mobilize the sector. Like it gives us a lot of talking points. Like you're going to somebody and you have very defined ideas of what you want to do with them, how they can support in the journey. And any field requires all of this to be built. And when I say field, I mean education has a certain set of actors pooling in different expertise, resources, ideas, health, all the sectors you mentioned in the start, right? Like these are all established. If I say one word, you certainly have images in your mind of what it could be. Cash transfers doesn't have that yet.
Considering the budget resources it has
Exactly.
been using.
Exactly. And also philanthropy, like for philanthropy to come in a much bigger way, because philanthropy has the ability to play, to enable experiments, to enable those risky ideas to just be tried out first before policy can take them up. So this report has multiple uses. It was a great learning journey for us. It has been a great way for us to build more partnerships. And it's a long 100-page report, but we
Yeah.
hope people will read it, break it up into
100
pieces and read it based on, what's interesting. But it's simple. It's a simple one. So yeah.
And so I was reading the report and this one of this page different values or outcomes a
Yeah.
cash transfer enables, and you put dignity at the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the choice and I think agency was at the bottom.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
font. Like what was the reasoning behind? Like I was very curious.
So that page is actually, we picked out the keywords from the different interviews that we had done. um, and justice or like dignity, those are like justice came up as an idea also in one of the economic survey chapters written by Arvind Subramaniam. He mentions the pros and cons of cash. It's a very interesting read. And he talks about justice as being one of the core pillars as to, if you want a more just society, how do you build it? So for me, that had been a space, but what we seen on ground and what we hear from people is also around dignity, that um, it manifests in different ways. You don't need to ask for credit. You're not relying on other people's choices for your
Mm.
life, like what to wear, where to live, how to, like what to learn. So in Krishnapur, actually, and we've spoken a lot about Krishnapur, but the first thing we heard when we went back to the community is like, hum sar utha ke ja paaye. Like we
Mm.
didn't have to ask for credit. So for us, it's been a common theme, but we also heard it from people a lot to say that it is a dignified form of welfare, which is why that appears at the top. I think agency is a subset of that. Choice, maybe
Mm.
people just think it's an obvious, maybe it's a given, so it wasn't that recurring, but yeah.
Right. And so this question, right? If you consider your initial hypothesis before you started work, like 2013, like this is what has surprised you the most about this whole outcome, the research you have done, uh, the pilots you have run, like these are the 2 3 key takeaways which we haven't thought about. This will make a difference. Like, okay, like, contrary to your expectations, like something you expected and played out makes sense. But what are the learnings or insights from the field which like surprised you completely? Like you never thought of it.
So something like Pankhuri mentioned before, that a few examples that come stand out really well. So while we were designing the program for 6 months, we were between us questioning whether we should do a financial literacy program along with it,
Mm.
where we explain what can be best done with cash. And the first project, we thought, let's not do it and see what happens. There was this ninth standard old boy who decided to buy a speaker set of 35,000 big speakers, and started renting it out. In first 3 months, he had a great ROI on it. 30% was already recovered. Throughout the year, he kept renting it in the village. So every festival, every birthday party, somebody's house, they need a speaker set to play music. That's a big source of entertainment. um, and he made so much money that he bought a sewing machine for his sister. They did agriculture in the next year, taking land on rent, or getting capital for, just because of they had that speaker set. Nowhere in our financial literacy program or a PPT that we would have made, we would have advised anybody on purchase a speaker set. uh, so experiences like that was very new for us, learnings for us as well, that people know their local economies much better.
Right.
uh, Another thing that surprised us, or me particularly, was how much knowledge transfer happened. So the local kirana shop was like 7 kilometers. The main market was 7 kilometers away from the village where we had done the pilot. And people went there, and they obviously got to know that this has happened. And people started just sharing knowledge that if you want to open a kirana store in your village, I'll tell you where to buy stuff from, how much to buy it for. People who did not had their own land started taking advice, and advice was shared as to how to take land on rent, which soil to prioritize, where to go. So there was a lot of hand holding between the community. So we saw a lot of cohesiveness that came in. These were intangible aspects that we didn't expect. We expect money will help people buy something, but there was a lot of intangibles that started showing up.
Like risk taking initiatives helps you learn, the
Mm.
community learn among them.
Right.
Like a lot of peer learning also, because now you have opportunity to do things. Going back to our point earlier, right? Like the community is learning together and sharing. Yeah, interesting. And financial literacy is like a not so obvious. Like they will know how to rent it out and build it out.
Mm.
No financial literacy program will help you do something with the money.
I
Uh,
think even dignity is like the word dignity, we use it today, but when we started the program, it was not, we didn't term it as dignity. Like, I think that's, we heard it from them the first time that, what it has done for them. And that's why now we use it so much. I think when we started off, we never had dignity in any of our concept notes that this is what the community will have. So choice, yes, we started
Choice
with like
agency is from,
choice
yeah.
agency, but we didn't start with that. I think it
And
came.
it became the topmost finest sort of like outcome
Yeah,
what you heard from community. Okay. Just to segue on the report and like how that has sort of helped you build a knowledge base. Are you also working with governments right now, state governments, advising them? Like how do you think your the sort of like trajectory moves or goes from here? What are your plans? What are you doing?
So while in the 2 years we were running these pilots in the communities, we also saw a huge adoption, 23x growth in cash transfers in the last 5 years,
Right. Yeah.
10 years. So
23x in last 10 years in the
Yes.
budgetary allocation to the cash transfer.
yes, it is right now at 0.9% of the GDP, 11% of all social sector spending. Sector spending is 25 lakh crores. 11% of entirety, 2,80,000 crores is directly going out from government bank accounts to citizens
Right.
today, which is huge amounts of money. So this movement was also happening. Multiple states, 14, 15 states have adopted cash transfers in a large way, is what we saw. So the scale pathway for us for the work that we were doing was also to start working with the government because they were already disbursing large sums of money. And the learnings we had, the global literature we studied, we started looking at policies that were getting created also. We segmented it into four. The value chain was across four verticals. The first one was building fiscal prudence because the schemes were so large that the states was announcing Maharashtra has a 36,000 crore scheme, Karnataka has a 28,000 crore scheme. These are huge budgets, which other schemes don't necessarily have. Today in the report, we mentioned that the unconditional cash transfer has exceeded the NREGA PDS budgets, which was the largest welfare schemes in the country. So these are large budget schemes the governments are announcing. So the first thing you need to understand is where does the money come from? So states started getting into rationalization of schemes as well. Uh, Maharashtra, for instance, has more than 2,000 welfare schemes, and so is Maharashtra is just one example, but other states also has a large number of schemes. How do you bring it down? How do you consolidate? How do you aggregate so that you can do more with less? That was this is not a popular, this is not a new idea. This has been people have been saying this for a long time, but cash now that this is happening by state governments, this is a great opportunity to converge some of the schemes that allows states to push for that idea. Running 2,000 welfare schemes is definitely one, extremely administratively ineffective. Second, it's very difficult to deliver 2,000 schemes. Like imagine an organization delivering 2,000 products. The supply chains wouldn't be as effective. Lot of challenges would come in the right set of delivery. With lesser things, you can ensure you will have lower administrative costs, but also more people managing the delivery of the scheme. Hence, the delivery would be better. So the first bit is the financial prudence building by rationalization of schemes. Second bit that we work with is policy design itself. So there's a framework of frequency, amount, communication, timing, targeting as well. As to using this framework, using these as levers, you can design better schemes depending on what the objective is. Like monthly cash transfers that goes out 1,500 every month to a citizen mostly gets consumed in routine expenses, but it also allows for access to education, access to healthcare. A large lump sum will allow you to buy assets more rather than it being spent in routine expenses. So more livelihood, more foundational assets being built for people. So depending on how you are giving the money, the usage of the money changes. How you're communicating, at what time period are you giving the money, all of these are factors that affect the usage of the money and hence the impact of the scheme. So we are working with state governments to improve the design or build design toolkits and guidelines basis which schemes can be designed and thought through. And we already see these different experiments. Sikkim has just announced 40,000 a year, 20,000 in 2 installments, while a state like Maharashtra is still giving 1,500 rupees per month. So you see design variations across states, which is great because you're seeing governments also trying out different things.
As states are like the policy lab of the country, right?
Right. So you're working. So we're working with most of them, trying to work with most of them to work out some of the design guidelines to take these decisions basis.
Right.
The third bit is implementation. How do you find out what are the gaps and how do you bring markets into it as well? Chhattisgarh is a great example where, sorry, where rural banks have started giving out loans or asset vouchers because now there is a guarantee that a particular person will receive money from the government in a year 20
Ah.
25,000. So now you can give credit basis that guarantee.
Okay.
So these again, this converts your monthly transfers into a lump sum, which allows you to buy agricultural assets, other assets that you need to purchase. So how do you bring markets in? How do you? So it's essentially changing your microfinance patterns. We do need to study this more to make the system work, make the household finance work, so that people can be pushed out of poverty. That's the implementation lens to it. And the last bit that we are trying to do is evidence gathering at a state level, not just at the pilot level that we were working at. Understanding a lot of governments do have demographic data as to if how many widowed women are receiving money, how many college going girls are receiving money, how many married women are receiving money. What they don't have particularly have is spending analysis as to once the money hits the account, what happens to the money after that? What is the savings versus expenditure behavior? At what time periods do people need money? So that evidence is still to be, or that understanding is still to be built. So we are working with states to build that as well by primary surveys or by banks having this database at the back of their end.
Sort of like a think, research, do, tank kind of
Yeah.
space. Because yeah, like if so much money is being spent, there's no particular organization which is working on this area,
Right.
and you have the experience of doing piloting it yourself. So you can also advocate. So you want to keep continuing the pilots also, the what you have been doing, or only
Yeah.
start transitioning into an advocacy sort of a research advisory?
No, pilots are important, I think, because there is still, like I said, there's so if you look at it, US, for example, they have 100 experiments going on, um, both privately and publicly funded, with different demographics. Like they have a program with convicts, they have a program with new mothers, with care leavers, with like women and farmers, like monolithic group. But there are obviously
Yeah.
subsections within the society. There are different models, like he said, the FACT framework, like when should you give the money, how much should you give, what is the ecosystem that can be built. So our pilots are allowing us to build this learning firsthand, right? Like to be able to translate it into policy insights. Um, the pilots are also great conversation. Like it mobilizes people to start talking and start understanding things better. So it's both. For us, it's like a personal lab, personal learning,
Mm.
but it's also for us to be able to like take it to other stakeholders, while policy, researchers, philanthropists, everybody, to just build out this space more strongly. So I think pilots will continue. And so, like you said, we are a think, research, do like all of it in one tank. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Amazing. So great to have you here today, Pankhuri and Muzamil. This was a really good discussion. I learned a lot, especially those insights regarding like how if you have cash, you are more productive, you have more entrepreneurial, you have more risk taking, which now seems very obvious in the but not in the initial hypothesis. Uh, and yeah, great to have you here, both of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Nitin, for having us here.
Yeah.
Thanks. This was fun.
Yeah. And yes, everyone can look at the report. It's called Unconditional Cash Transfers in India, Tracing the Journey, Shaping the Future. We'll put it in our show notes and you can download and sort of like give it a read. It's a very well designed report. Thank you.